Now that we have all that we need to build our rod, it's time to get started. Firstly, we'll need to wipe down the blank with some denatured alcohol to make sure that we are starting with a clean product. Once we have all of the sections cleaned, we'll set aside all except for the butt section, as that's what we'll be working on first. So now we take our butt section and let's get started with this. If you're building a rod with a fighting butt, such as this one, you will first need to saw off a very small 6mm section from the butt end of the blank. This will ensure that when the rod is finished, all rod sections will be exactly the same length, which is a nice touch and also helps with fitting the rod back into the rod sock and rod tube. I do the sawing with a hacksaw and a sharp fine blade. The rod that I'm building this time has no fighting butt, so no sawing necessary. If you have a fighting butt, the process will be ever so slightly different. You will need to check whether the fighting butt fits snugly onto the blank or whether a small arbor will be necessary. A trim ring also fits between the fighting butt and the reel seat. This will need to be in place for both the dry and final assemblies. Otherwise, simply replace the end cap with the fighting butt. Take the end cap, reel seat, blank and grip. Assemble them in an upright position and ensure that all components are fully seated down. Mark the top of the grip on the blank with the Chinograph pencil. Disassemble the components. Place masking tape on the mark to make absolutely sure that you don't disturb the blank above this point in the next few steps. Now scuff the blank below the mark with a high grit abrasive paper or Scotch-Brite pad to prepare for gluing. Wipe the section down with denatured alcohol to remove the loose material. Now reassemble the reel seat and end cap on the blank. This time, mark the top of the reel seat and disassemble again. As you will have noticed with the dry assembly of the reel seat on the blank, there's quite a gap between the two. We need to fill this gap by building an arbor. Using a pair of calipers, I measure the inner diameter of the reel seat. My arbor should end up just shy of this diameter, to leave a little space for resin. Starting 1 centimeter up from the blank butt, the masking tape is wrapped around the blank until the desired diameter is reached. Repeat this at the other end of the reel seat position, level with the marker, and again in the middle. test that the real seat fits over the arbor with a tiny bit of space. Now it's time for gluing, so spread some newspaper or similar, and have some denatured alcohol and cleaning implements at the ready. Mix up your resin with an equal amount of resin and hardener. Make sure to use a different spatula for each product. Apply a thin coating of resin to the arbors with a spatula and fill the gaps between. Slide the real seat up into position so that it's level with the bottom of the blank. Spread a thin film of resin over the grip area and dab a small amount of resin to the outer walls of the real seat inlet of the grip. Now slide the grip down over the blank. Rotate it on the resin to help get an even spread. If there is excess resin, remove it with a spatula before engaging with the real seat. Now slide the grip fully down onto the real seat.
Well, that's my worst yet.
At this point, I like to fit the end cap. Apply a little resin to the bottom inside edge of the real seat and a blob on the inside of the end cap. Place the end cap on the bottom of the rod and stand it all up. Push down with the grip, whilst holding the blank with your other hand, ensuring the blank is seated on the end cap. Check for squeeze out and remove any with denatured alcohol and a rag. A cotton bud soaked in denatured alcohol or a toothpick dipped in denatured alcohol can also be useful tools at this point. Apply a thin line of epoxy to the blank where it meets the grip. Now slide the winding check down to this position. The whole assembly is set aside at this stage for the epoxy to cure.
Now let's talk about what I just messed up. I made the big error of rushing. My camera's having overheating issues and I was more preoccupied with getting everything done in a rush before everything overheated and shut down again than actually concentrating on the build. So my first error was leaving too much glue on the blank just above the real seat after I'd slid it on. This should have been really reduced to more or less nothing. The second problem was to put a bit too much glue all over where the grip will slide on. This is a really tight fitting grip, so there was not much space for glue, so any extra would just slide down. Which moves on to the next and biggest problem. As I slid the grip down the blank, turning it as I go, I should have stopped multiple times to clear out any excess glue that was building up. That would have meant that when I got down to this area, which was the point that I realised that I'd done this and tried to pick out some with a small pick, but it was too late really by then, although maybe I should have spent a bit more time pulling out more glue. Yeah, by the time you get down to here, then there's not a huge globule of glue that prevents a good fit of the grip onto the reel seat without masses of squeeze out. And that is when I blew the cork handle and got this breakout where the glue squeezed through the handle and squeezed out of the bottom. Out of the bottom I was able to clear up pretty well, but the handle I now need to repair, which is something that I've not done before, but we'll get round to that at the end of the build. Yeah, I'm really kicking myself as this was so avoidable and is something I've never done before because I'm purely concentrating on the build and thinking about that. It's also very embarrassing because the whole point of this video was to show how easy the process is. Also, moving on to the end cap, I should have added some glue inside of the end cap and not just at the end of the rod inside of the reel seat. It's not the biggest deal because I put enough resin in there that the end cap bonded properly, so no problems anyway. I was just a bit flustered by making such an unusual mistake. So the other thing about the end cap is this one has some branding on it. None of the ones that I've done before had branding on the end cap. This only makes a difference in the alignment, and normally I'm just aligning according to the logo on the blank, but there's no logo on this one. So I didn't really think about the end cap alignment at all, and since I was a bit flustered, completely flew over my head. Really the Epic logo should sit horizontal, so the reel is below the rod. Now I have it at a bit of a diagonal. That annoys me, but I'll just have to live with it. That's it for this video. In the next part, we'll spine the rod and mount the guides. I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.